Well, hello, my friends. This is your boy, Garrett J, the founder of Wake Up Warrior and the creator of the Warrior Book, found at warriorbook.com. Welcome to Warrior Wealth, and this is our second episode, and I say our, meaning myself and our teams and our networks have put together this show. I am excited to be here as we get off into the actual content of this idea of making money, keeping money, and growing money. Now, always, if you are not currently aware of this, you're able to watch this, you can listen to this, and or you can read it. You can check it all out at warriorwealthnow.com. You can check it out on our fan page at Warrior Wealth, and or get yourself into iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher to gain access to all of this valuable training and ideas and concepts here inside the Warrior Wealth Show. So today we're going to dive into our first topic. We have I set the stage last week for really why the show existed. And also inside of why the show existed, we began the frame. And I gave you the frame. The frame was really simple. We were going to divide each one of our weeks up into a series of topics. Right? Simple topics, give you some frames so you know where to focus. Last week was our first show. It was just kind of the overview. Then we had our outline. The outline is really simple. First show every single week, we're going to focus on the topic of power, which is where we're going to go today. Okay, that's going to be our first topic. Our second topic is going to be on the topic of production. That's going to be our second week here inside, so that'll be episode number 3. Our third topic, which will be episode number 4, is going to come down to the topics of profit. And then our final week of every single month is going to be our protection. So these are going to be kind of our overall topics. I discussed what those were. If you want to go back and listen to the pilot, you can get an overview of what this is all about. If you're completely unaware of what the Wake Up Warrior movement's all about, you have no idea who I am, you might have gotten into this podcast for the very first time, you're like, who is this fucking yokel chokel? No worries, I get it, I understand it. Go check it out. Go Google Garrett J. White and or head to warriorweek.com, wakeupwarrior.com, warrioronfire.com, dateyourwife.com, anywhere. Listen, just go up and look the Wake Up Warrior up online. You'll learn more about me and where we're at today. One of the best ways to start with that, though, is inside of a tool we call the Warrior Book, found at warriorbook.com. Let's get into today's topic. So we're going to discuss this idea of money today, but we're going to discuss the idea of money through an angle that is a little bit different than where most individuals may or may not experience it. Let's take a look at the following idea, and that is this. What is an asset at all? When we think about what assets are, when we think about what assets are in general, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Now, I don't know how you were raised. I don't know what your business background looks like. I don't know what your world looks like as an investor, as a businessman. I have no idea what that game actually stands for inside of your world. But here's what I can tell you. The word asset does not actually mean the same thing to everyone. So we're going to take a look at this word asset for a second, and we're going to take a look at the word liability. And we're going to look at these two ideas. And then we're going to also take our conversation a little bit further, and we're going to look at the idea of power and its connection to these topics of assets and liabilities. Now, if you remember back to the very first show, we started talking around this idea of my backstory and why and how I even got into money. I was a PE teacher and a football coach. I ended up in the mortgage and banking industry. That imploded for me like many, many people, maybe you listening to the show. And inside of that implosion, inside of that change, things began to shift for us. I started searching for something. I started searching for purpose. But what I really started searching for, more than I had ever imagined, was this topic of power. And so before we jump into the ideas of assets, we're going to take a look at this idea of power, and then I'm going to link in a principle which I call your number one asset. But we're going to stick back with this number one asset topic by first discovering what this power idea is all about anyways. So my very first time in business, I was actually a phone salesman. I got onto the phones. I was a VA home loan specialist. Veteran Affairs, bank or government-backed loans here in the United States still exist. This is where I got my start as a businessman and an entrepreneur. I would head into this cubicle down in this basement. They gave me a stack of phone numbers, and on these phone numbers, I got on the phone, I smiled and dialed, and I learned all my first experiences with getting rejected and being told no. And for the next 6 months, I would make literally no money. But what I did learn was I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what it took to deal with rejection. So right out of the gate, well, I'm going to have you consider that one of the greatest reasons or the greatest challenges that you as a businessman and you as an entrepreneur face when it comes to the world of money, when it comes to the world of wealth, when it comes to the world of business and investing, has absolutely zero to do with tactics and skills. But it has everything to do with this other thing inside of you and I. Now, I'm going to get into tactics, and we're going to talk about tactics and tools, and we're going to talk about techniques here in this show week by week. But I'm going to have you step back for a second and recognize that sitting there in that cubicle, I had one thing and I had one thing only, and I had commitment. Like, this was the thing that I had, was commitment. And I swear to God, across all of what exists inside the game of making money, the game of investing, the game of running businesses, the games of building wealth inside of your life, inside of mine, and across the globe, that what we face more as a challenge today than we ever have before is not a lack of knowing what to do, but ultimately a lack of even having the power to do it. That your greatest challenge is the simple fact that you don't actually have the power required and the power necessary to produce the results that you desire. And so people can give you tactics. They can give you the tools. But if you don't have the capacity to actually do the shit that you know you need to do, it doesn't matter. If you don't have the courage to make the moves that you know you need to make the move, it doesn't matter. You can go to workshop after workshop, seminar after seminar. You can read book after book, watch webinar after webinar. You can listen to podcast after podcast about wealth and investing. You can get all up in the hand jobs and blowjobs around the whole cryptocurrency conversation. You can jump on the next bandwagon in the game of wealth. But here is the challenge. You will be nothing more than a gambler. The one place you've got to bring stability when it comes to building wealth is the stability inside of you. The stability inside of you. You realize that the greatest risk that exists inside of your world of building financial prosperity and wealth has zero to do with the opportunities and has everything to do with the risk that you personally bring to the table. So this brings us to our asset and liability conversation. Are you your greatest asset or are you your greatest liability? What is an asset? An asset is something that brings value to the table or that has worth. What is a liability? Something that takes value from the table. So we have a table, we have a bunch of 2 items on it. We have value that's being placed on the table, and then we have value that's being taken away from the table. Make this very simple. Inside of a car conversation, I have a car, I have the value of the car, and then I have the liability of the car. The liability of the car is the loan that I owe. The value of the car is quote unquote the asset. But see, this is the easy surface level shit. Here's the appraised value. Here's the asset value in my asset column. Here is the liability. But here's the thing that's crazy. I want you to consider that the greatest liability and or asset inside of your world right now is actually you. It's not one thing sitting on your portfolio. It's not one thing sitting on your account statement right now. It's not sitting on your balance statement. It's not sitting in your income column. It's not sitting in your expense column. It has nothing to do with your employees. It has nothing to do with what investment opportunity, how your business is doing or not doing. That the greatest risk to you being successful today comes down to you as a leader inside of your own business. Actually having the balls to do what you know you need to do. And there I sat with my balls out on the table as a young man, PE teacher, left the PE industry, left with my PE degree, my degree in kickball, no suit, didn't own one, ended up in the mortgage industry. There I was in the basement, no lights, like hardly any lights, no windows, no clocks. There I sat with an old mortgage calculator, an HP 12C, where I had to actually type the numbers in backwards. None of this fucking cell phone bullshit. None of these easy online calculators, nothing. I had to think backwards because the goddamn calculator went backwards. So there I was, making phone calls. And making no money at the same time. Obviously not being very good at it. But I'm making phone calls, but I'm gaining a valuable skill. And I'm gaining a valuable resource that was being made available to me day by day, hour by hour, week by week, that I was hustling inside of that basement until the first month that I did just over 10,000. Then the 10,000 went to 20,000. The 20 went to 40. The 40 went to 60. The 60 went to 150. The 150 went to 500,000. 500,000 went to a million. And the game itself began in this basement being willing to make phone calls. Yeah, I had friends. I had friends that started the same time as me. They were servers at restaurants. Maybe that's you right now. Maybe you're me in my mid-20s. And you're listening to this show and you're like, okay, I kind of like this guy from the Warrior on Fire podcast. I like this guy with his warrior message. I'm not a big businessman. I'm getting my game started. And you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, well, what do I actually need? And I'll tell you what you need more than anything. You need big fucking balls. And those balls do not come driven to you by some delivery service. It's not like, Uber Eats, which brings you food. They got Uber balls and they just show up and drop some balls on your porch. Steel balls are built over time and under pressure. And your personal power and certainty comes line upon line and precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, until that day comes when you as an investor and as a businessman, you begin to recognize that your entire financial empire or the lack thereof is a simple mere reflection of who you have become as a man. Who you are as a producer is driven by this reality of your ability to access, to maintain, and sustain power. Men try to do a lot of different interesting things to keep and to maintain power. Back in those days, we tried these adrenaline pills. They were these interesting little tablets. They were ephedrine. I don't know, maybe you were from the ephedrine generation. Then they completely disbanded these ephedrine pills. But these ephedrine pills became like the go-to thing on the sales floor. So we would sit in there, myself and my other little cronies on the floor in these cubicles, making phone calls to veterans about refinancing their home. I still remember the day a woman said, listen, I am not going to refinance my home right now. I was like, lady, are you out of your mind? She said, here's what I want to do. I'm going to wait until rates go down to 9%. And when they do, you call me back and we'll refinance. And I said, lady, it will be a cold day in hell before rates go to 9%. Well, obviously, I had no idea what the fuck I was talking about because rates not only went to 9%, they went clear down to like below 2%. They went to a totally different place, and over the next 15 years, the mortgage industry would go up and down and all over the place, and women like this woman I was talking to would refinance like crazy, and many of these veterans would refinance their homes 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. But I sat there searching for the one thing that I didn't have, which was just time under tension and belief in myself. I get asked a lot, what's the number one skill that an investor and entrepreneur can have today? And I said, belief in oneself. And some people think this is like some bullshit speech, and I'm like throwing out some bullshit little personal development speech. They're like, what the fuck does this guy know? He's a breakthrough trainer. He's a personal development trainer. He just runs these warrior weeks. What does he know about wealth? What does he know about business? Motherfucker, you think that this thing was built because I can yell into a microphone? The empires that I run and the businesses that I run were built because I'm a businessman. And businessmen build businesses and build empires. They build kingdoms because they base them driven upon principles. But these principles that they follow align with something different than what everybody else sees. One of the big distinctions is that they see themselves as an asset. That the number one asset in their life is not their real estate. The number one asset in their life is not their business. The number one asset in their life is nothing outside of them. That the number one asset in their investing and business life is themselves. That the number one investment or asset in your life is you. But see, what determines whether or not you are an asset or a liability inside of your economic world comes down to your ability and your capacity to create, to maintain, and sustain power. Now, power itself is something that can be generated. It's something that can be generated. So let's go back to the ephedrine pill. So there I am on the floor, and my friends give these ideas. We want to be really pumped up, right? We want to be pumped up on the phone. So my friend breaks out these purple and yellow pills. He said, take this pill. I was like, what does this pill do? He's like, dude, it's going to give you tons of energy. I'm like, okay. So we take the pill. Of course, we take the pill at like 9 o'clock at night. We had like 30 more minutes or something, maybe an hour that we could make phone calls before, we were shut down. Then we were going to play some video games, and we were going to go hang out and do shenanigans for us at night. I'm not married at this time to my wife, Danielle. I've been married now 15 years. So I'm sitting in this situation. We take these pills at 9 o'clock. I get totally amped up, and I cannot literally fall asleep. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm still lying on the bathroom floor. Cannot sleep. Eyes are wide open. I am stuck awake. It was a horrible insomniatic experience. But this pill gave me the power to not sleep. Unfortunately, it didn't help my sales skills at all. It actually made me jittery, talk too fast, and I already talk fast as it is, which made it impossible to fucking understand me because I was talking so fast for so long. And so this pill is an attempt to create power. And men do this. Businessmen will attempt to do this. They will attempt to drink it, to fuck it, to smoke it, a pill to pop it, that somehow if I can drink it, smoke it, fuck it, pop it, that inside of that place, I will be able to deliver up power in my life. And you can, just like the ephedrine pill. The ephedrine pill took me until about 7 o'clock in the morning to fall asleep, and then I crashed. Alcohol has done the same thing. Cocaine has done the same thing to me and many others. This desire to find power outside of oneself. Sometimes I would sit as a young businessman, and I had business partners. Why did I have business partners? Because I didn't believe enough in myself. I'm not saying that business partners are a problem, but my first almost 10 years as a businessman, I invested in businesses, yet I did almost all the work, and I had business partners that ultimately were not truly worthy to be my partners. But why did I do it? Because I lacked power. So part of power comes down to this idea of permission. Giving yourself permission to be great, giving yourself permission to make money, giving yourself permission to close, giving yourself permission to market, giving yourself permission to make money, to save money, to grow money, to protect the money that you make. This is a permission game, my friend. Like, I didn't know what to do when I started making money. Like, I would have money sitting in my accounts, and it made me very uncomfortable. Maybe you're not that guy, but I wasn't raised with money. I didn't have any money. So when I started looking at my accounts and seeing tens of thousands of dollars, which for a PE teacher is like, what the fuck is going on around here? Like, I didn't know how to respond. I had no answer for this. I had no response for this of what was occurring for me, looking at my accounts, seeing all this money. Yet internally, I was driven by this belief system of scarcity. No matter how much money I made, no matter how productive I would get, this scarcity virus would follow me around, would literally follow me around because it was inside of me for 7 to 8 to 9 years, almost 10 years of my first run as an entrepreneur, 17 years now as an entrepreneur. Scarcity. So what are we talking about here? What is this scarcity idea? The scarcity is this belief system inside of lack. It's this idea that there is only enough. There's only a certain amount available in the world of money. There's only a certain amount available of love, of sexuality, of intimacy, of connection, of friendship. And I was raised inside of a financial scarcity. I was not raised inside of a love scarcity. My parents loved me. My family loved me. I had great relationships, great friendships. But money at the core, I was raised in scarcity. There was never enough, no matter how much I tried. There was never enough inside of me. There was never enough around me. And no matter how much I got, I was pretty confident that it would be gone shortly and that I would be left again with not much. Now, maybe you were like my children and being raised in a prosperous situation. You're being raised in abundance. You're being raised by entrepreneurs. You're being raised by individuals who are teaching you and training you to think otherwise. But I was not. I was not. And so when I got my hands on the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which I was studying passionately during my days of popping ephedrine pills and selling mortgages in a basement in a cubicle down in Utah County, Utah. As I'm sitting there, I'm learning. I'm learning inside of myself. I'm learning inside of my mind. I'm learning inside of my heart that there is this other world that exists that I am clueless to. Inside the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki divides these two worlds up into his rich dad and his poor dad. And he broke it down not just by money and economics, but he broke it down by this idea around the way that people thought. His dad was a teacher and an educator, and his best friend's dad, which is actually a guy by the name of Keith Cunningham, was his rich dad. And his rich dad was an investor and a businessman and did not think the same way at all. They did not look at assets and liabilities. One looked at college education as the gateway. The other one looked at education in the game of production was the gateway. This is a conversation I'm having right now with my son, who is at the university. His mother and I are having conversation with him. My son from my first marriage, because why? He doesn't know if he wants to be in college. He's like, I don't know if I like this college game. I was like, well, I don't care if you go to college. You don't have the right to be uneducated. You do have the right to choose how you're educated. And you can be educated in a lot of ways, particularly financially, as a marketer, as a salesman, as a systems builder, as a software guy, as a man who thinks through problem solving and adding value in today's marketplace. College education doesn't necessarily get you there. And so here we have this divide. And there I was with a college degree, knowing that my college degree in physical education was not going to do me much. Sitting there selling, taking ephedrine pills, selling VA home loans, and hoping for a bigger future. Realizing that first month I make $10,000, that there might be a bigger future, but only ending up with a bunch of money in my bank accounts and running my own businesses and feeling scared, more and more terrified, the more money that I made. Now, I never thought this could be an issue. T. Harv Eker at the time, I was studying his book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I was reading everything and anything I possibly get my hands on. Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and just about every Cash Flow Quadrant, anything that Robert Kiyosaki wrote. Since that time, I've written literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. I've not read thousands. There are some who have read thousands. I've not read thousands. I've read hundreds and hundreds of books. I read books. I study them deeply. And this was my case with Robert Kiyosaki. And I traveled around dealing with this education piece inside of me. Trying to deal with this one thing that was going on inside of me. One of my cameras stopped working. I'm not sure why. It's just showing a nice white screen right now. All right, well, for those on the recorded side, I will stop going to that screen. I don't know why it's doing that. We'll just we'll turn it here this way. This will be my main screen. I will just talk to you here. And this one is the white one, and we won't go to that one, and we'll go to this one. And you know what? Fuck it. We're just going to stay on this camera. So if you're watching it, I'm just going to talk on this one camera because I don't know what just happened. The camera just stopped working on the one side. So I'm sitting there and I'm studying and I'm learning. But what I'm learning more than anything is that the greatest risk to my wealth was my psychology. That the greatest risk to my investing was my psychology. That the greatest risk to my businesses was my psychology as a businessman and as an investor. And the first divide I had to make was in this abundance and scarcity game. And I had to go to war with a virus that had been implanted by me by all of my family. My mom, my dad, my brothers, my sisters, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents. I didn't know anyone who had wealth. I knew no one. I didn't know entrepreneurs. I didn't know investing. No one talked about this shit when I was growing up. That's not true. My dad one time got involved with a company called Primerica. Buy term, invest the difference. And I remember I invested in a term life insurance policy when I was probably 24, and I thought I was awesome because I was investing $127 a month or something like that into this policy, and it was saving some money. It was not. I ended up cashing that out years later, but I had a little term policy with a little invested difference on the side into the stock market, and I made a little little dash, my friend, a little dash I made as a young investor. But I didn't know anything. My dad didn't know shit either. My dad got looped into a network marketing company with Primerica, and he wanted to do his best to try to provide for the family and make a different way, and it didn't work out for him that way. But it did expose me a little bit to the possibility. But marrying my wife and meeting my wife exposed me to prosperity in a deep way. My wife was raised around abundance. Her parents were entrepreneurs. They were investors. They built real estate development, commercial property. They lived in 11, 12,000 square foot homes, drove Porsches. It was a totally different world. I knew nothing about this world except for the fact that I was in love with their daughter. And when I stepped in their home, it was like I was awkward and uncomfortable because I had no idea how to deal with it. No idea. I did not understand that abundance was a mindset. Abundance was a way of coming from inside of my own mind. So I will sit down with individuals and attempt to help them see strategies inside of marketing and sales. how to advertise, how to run sales systems, how to build funnels inside of their world, how to manage people, how to expand their business, how to double down, how to go 2, 3, 4 times growth every single year, with exactly what we've done across 4 businesses from scratch zero back in 2011 until today. Millions and millions and millions and millions a month running through all the businesses. And guess what? Inside of that place, I can teach you all the tactics, but what ends up happening is that your psychology and your mind actually interprets, filters, destroys, deletes, or delegates the information that I give you. You're not actually even listening to the shit I'm telling you. You're not even hearing what I'm saying right now. What you're hearing is what you are wanting to hear, driven by what I'm saying. It's your mind's interpretation of what I'm saying. I know because there was a whole lot of shit that people would share with me back when I first got started as a young 25-year-old, 24-year-old entrepreneur. I'm 41, almost 42 now. 17 years later, there's shit people were sharing with me back then. I was like, I couldn't understand what they were saying at all. They would say it, but I only gleaned a piece of it. Just like you're only gleaming a piece of what I'm saying right now. Because your psychology affects your ability to actually produce, because your psychology is linked up to your capacity. And your capacity is a function of both what you know and at the same time what you do. And your ability to do inside of a productive way is driven by your capacity and your power, not by any other factor. It's not by luck. It's not by chance. It's driven by this idea that you and I are powerful creators. And inside of being powerful creators, the only way that we can produce more is to become more. And inside of becoming more and doing more, these two beings and doings come together. Life itself begins to change. And one of the first things we have to start to take a look at is we have to take a look at this idea of abundance and scarcity. And we say, well, scarcity tells me there is lack, that there's never enough, that I have to take from people in order to win, that there's no such thing as win-win, there is only win-lose, and this itself goes on. And there's this overall general idea for operating in life from scarcity. And this place we call the pretender. And so there's actually a label and a name that I've given to the scarcity-driven businessmen and investors in the marketplace, which is pretender. The pretenders are the users, the moochers, the looters. They're the individuals who truly do not understand the game of capitalism and the game of creative growth inside of economics and business. They misidentify assets. They misidentify liabilities. They misidentify what actually fuels the economy. They misidentify what fuels a businessman's life. The pretender is constantly looking outside of himself for the answer, is constantly looking outside of himself for the piece that he is missing. Well, if I just go to this event, if I just go to this experience, then I will be smart enough to pull it off. Or maybe the challenge is that you're already smart enough, but you don't actually do the shit that you know you need to do. And because you don't do the shit that you know you need to do, because you continue to avoid doing the shit that you know you need to do, your economics and your investment life and your businesses do not flourish and do not experience abundance and do not experience prosperity at the level that you desire or at the level that you ultimately deserve, because you operate from a psychological blueprint that is completely fucked. And I know because I lived in it. And no matter how much money I made, I found a way to give it away. I found a way to destroy it. I found a way to burn it to the ground. I found a way to get stagnant and make it disappear. Because ultimately, I was more comfortable being stuck in scarcity and poverty. Because underneath the surface, I didn't feel like a producer. I felt like a pretender in a producer's suit. I actually went away from wearing suits for a very, very long time because I had used suits to hide me. Now I use suits because I like them. I wear jackets because I like them. Not because I have to have them. I don't need to. I could roll up in here butt-ass naked and shoot this show, and I would shoot it with just as much power and just as much intensity. Nothing changes inside of that for me. I like wearing them, so I wear them because I want them, not because I need to. But back then I went away from suits. I went away from them because they were a symbol of me being able to mask this truth that operated inside of me, which is no matter what I did and no matter how much I made and no matter where I went, internally I felt like a fucking pretender as a businessman. I felt like a pretender as an investor. I felt like a guy who didn't deserve to be at the table. I was not a trust fund baby. I was not raised with a silver spoon in my mouth. I was not given money by anyone. I did not get any funding from my businesses. I bootstrapped the shit out of my businesses the first time and the second time. I have, my entire life has been driven by my own sweat of my own brow, aligning with and leading other people to rally around a cause that I thought was true. And I struggled. I struggled for years with this disabling belief system, which was that I wasn't enough. That everybody at some level would find out that I was just a piece of shit from the street. That I was not raised in money. That I was not actually as successful as they thought I was. No matter how the many cars, the homes, nothing. Inside there was this internal thing when I was all alone, which had me feel weak and feel vulnerable and feel unworthy and feel like a pretender. Fear was the fuel that rode and drove my creativity. And that was the case for a very, very long time. And it's why I never built anything that actually lasted, because anything I would build driven by that fire is a battery. It's a battery life. That shit will burn to the ground. It will disappear on you. It cannot last. It will not last because it is not true. And then I was introduced to this other world. This other world of abundance. The world of abundance speaks to this idea that you and I, that there is a limitless possibility to what we can create as individuals. That God in the universe has created a world of opportunity for you and I, and that it is our responsibility as men, as producers, as creators, to ultimately create from the unorganized organization, to create from the disorganized, the creative game of organization, to create from the chaos into clarity. That this was our responsibility, and that entrepreneurs and businessmen, this was what we were called to do. That there was no limitation based on the number of people. Yes, supply and demand and the game of economics. I get it. I get it that statistics tells us some things. I get that science tells us some things. I get that the world itself operates from a certain game of order, and that at times inside of that order, things themselves change up. Things themselves go different and distinct. But the one thing that stayed common through all of this, the one thing that stayed common through the entire experience, the one thing that has stayed true for you and I from the very, very beginning, is this reality inside of you and I. And that reality says the following. It says that the power that we search for cannot be found outside of us. That the power that we search for can only be found inside of us. That the power to produce does not come from scarcity. That the power to produce, when drawn from scarcity, when drawn from the weakness that comes from fear, that when we only know how to draw from this place, we are limited and driven to despair. And so I can line two individuals up. I can line up a very highly educated individual who is stuck in the drama loop and the trauma loop and the drifting game inside. And I can line up a man who has much less knowledge and much less skill set, but a deep level of certainty inside of himself to solve problems. You can line those two individuals up together, and what I will put my money on every single time is the guy filled with fire over the guy who has all the answers. Because the guy who has all the answers but no fire, he has all function but no fire. He has all potential but no power. I will double down on a businessman who is in fire and a businessman on power who is committed to solving problems and learning what is required and doing what is required because of the power that he accesses from the inside than I will every single day trying to bet on a man who's super fucking smart. Do you want to know why? Because the really super fucking smart guys, the really, really smart, quote unquote, educated men, most of these men are asking me for jobs. You know why? Because I have the thing they can't have. I have the thing they can't buy. I have the thing that no college will give them. I have the thing that no certificate of graduation will give them. I have the thing that no licensing or certification will give them. I have the thing that can only be created, and that is I have the certainty inside of myself. I have the power and the only currency that actually matters today as a producer in a world of chaos, and that is certainty. But certainty comes in a very different way than most people would think. Certainty is not something given to you. Certainty is something that you create through experience. And oftentimes, certainty can only come on the wake of deep despair. So as my businesses were growing, and I was a young businessman, I found myself constantly in this confusing place of disbelief in myself while at the same time deeply wanting to believe in myself. I pushed everybody away. I kept everybody on the outside, even all my employees. Nobody really knew what was going on inside of me because what was going on inside of me was a shit show. You know, most days I would wake up and go into the office and I had zero idea what the fuck I was going to do. And I would shut my door behind me and I would sit and I would stare out at the windows in my offices in Vegas, which is where we ran our first companies. And I would sit in Vegas and look out the windows of the desert and I would be like, oh, fuck. Like, I literally just don't know what to do. Like, I want to move. I want to grow. I want to commit. I want to become more. I want to build this business. But there was so much pressure and there was so much confusion. So much confusion about who I was, so much confusion about what I was being called to do, so much confusion about where my life was supposed to go as an investor, as a businessman. Like, I didn't know. I was following everybody else's script. I didn't know what my script was. And it took the rise of an empire and the implosion of an empire for me in 2008, heading into the darkest, deepest, darkest pit of my life in 2009. For me to wake up to the possibility that the reason why my life does not work and the reason why I cannot rebuild my financial empire to what it used to be and the reason why I'm having to sell shit out of my garage to put groceries in my fridge had nothing to do with not knowing what to do. It had to do with not having the power to actually pull it off. And so in those dark moments, I started down this path and I uncovered a system called the Warrior's Way. And I uncovered it piece by piece and bit by bit. I had nothing. I built something massive. I lost everything. And then I sat in a situation where my entire life had become a shit show. Everything around me was falling apart. My marriage was falling apart. My business was falling apart. Like my body was falling apart. My addictions were running rampant. My family life was falling apart. Like everything around me was falling apart. I had lost all answers. I had no answers. I had no solutions to what I was facing. I had no idea what I was actually supposed to do. No clue. And inside of that power, or that situation, I woke up one morning and I started asking myself different questions. And the question that I started asking myself really was driven by this reality of asking myself, okay, well, what is it that actually makes me feel powerful? Because I couldn't wake up and just wake up pumped up and ready to go. Like, I was terrified to make phone calls. I'd gotten terrified by even asking for the money. Fuck investment strategies. Like, I had just become paranoid, terrified of myself. I would dance around sales conversations. My presentations were all teaching and no pitching. Like, I couldn't put deals together. I couldn't negotiate. Like, I would walk into meetings and I would feel nervous and go to hype and motivation. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And as I sat there over the next couple of years between 2009, 10, 11, and 12. In 2012 was when I launched the movement Wake Up Warrior. In 2009 to 2012, I started searching for this formula. I was convinced one day, as I sat there, that my life itself could be as automatic and could be as unemotionally attached as the KPIs in a business. That the marketing numbers, the sales numbers, the employment numbers, the profitability numbers, our gross margin, our net margins, our net profits, like all of this, like as predictable as numbers were in business, I was convinced that my life could be measured that practically also. The game of business was easy to win. You make money, you win. You grow the company, you win. Like there were wins that were easy to see. But inside of my life, I did not know how to get back to a place of certainty and power to pull that off. I had never lost before. It was easy to come from having never had it because I didn't know any different. But once I had it, once I knew what it tasted like, it was incredibly difficult for me to rebuild. This is why I'm not impressed by investors or businessmen who built once and that is it. I'm not impressed by the young 20-something-year-olds. I'm like, dude, you're not married. You don't even have children. Like you've never been through a crisis. You've never, like you don't even know what you're going to do when shit hits a fan. And it's hard because I was that young guy. I didn't listen. I didn't listen to what was happening. My mentors were giving me advice. I was getting counsel. They were all giving me the words that I couldn't hear. And so as I sat on the backside of this, I recognized that my problem was power. My problem in my business meetings was power. When I would walk in and I would fuck up another business conversation, another potential client gone, it came down to the same thing every single time, which was I was weak and I didn't know how to get back into power. I knew the framework of how a sales conversation is supposed to happen. I had done them thousands of times. I had sold tens of millions of dollars. And yet there I was, desperate, trying to figure out how the fuck I was going to get a couple $1,000. Like I had turned into a paranoid and panicked man. And so I started back at the basics and I realized that there were a couple things inside of my life that gave me power. One was working out. And so I started to investigate and I started to track and I started to notice that when I worked out, and when I participated in fitness, that there was more fire. And so I started getting back into fitness every single day. Then I started going a little bit further. I began down a path of meditation. I started studying meditation. I started studying Buddhism and Hinduism. I was raised in the Mormon faith. I ended up leaving that church almost a decade ago, not because there's anything wrong with that church. I just felt that my path was somewhere else. I started to study and these traditions and ideas that were new to me, concepts I had never been introduced before, considerations that I had never considered before. And inside of that place, I started to find that the more connected I felt to God, to this voice inside of me, the more profound and the more powerful my experience would be. And the more profound that experience would be, the more connected I could be to the idea that I was actually worth it. And so I would sit there and I would meditate. And I recognized, just like fitness, that when I meditated, I found more power. And so I would meditate and I would study and I would create this spiritual connection on a daily basis, as well as my fitness. And I had found these two things that seemed stable to me. I could master my fitness and I could master the way I dealt with my fuel inside of my body. And I could also deal with my meditation and my spiritual purpose. And so I would pray and I would meditate on a daily basis. And I would find consistency inside of that. My wife is calling me during this show. I am finishing up the Warrior on Fire podcast, or the Warrior Wealth podcast. I'm going to put her on speaker so that you guys can actually hear that I'm not kidding around. Say hello to everyone on the Warrior Wealth podcast. Oh, she hung up on me. Okay. So inside of this, then, I had these two areas on lockdown. I had body on lockdown, and I had being on lockdown. Meditation every day. I started working out better every single day. My fitness and my body and my being started to get on purpose, and I would notice this deeper sense of power and this deeper sense of connection to power as I woke up and I began my pursuit down this path of financial prosperity, down this path of creating certainty inside of myself. Then there was a third piece, and the third piece was a little trickier, and that dealt with my wife, and that dealt with my children. And I started realizing that a lot of the power that I lost inside of my business and a lot of the power that I was losing was I felt so much shame and guilt. Shame and guilt for where I'd put our family. Shame and guilt for what I had done and decisions I'd made in the past. Shame and guilt about the fact that I wasn't spending time with my family. I was hiding from my kids and my wife because I had no answers. Shame and guilt about the fact that as a producer, I was not getting it done for my family. But more than that, because I didn't even know how to communicate or connect with my kids and my wife in a powerful way. And so I started this process, this discipline of making daily deposits into the life of my wife and my children. And I started going on dates with my wife every single week. And we would fight and we would battle and we would try to figure out ourselves and our marriage because things were a fucking shit show. And I would take my kids out on date nights every week by themselves and as the two little girls together. My son was living up in Canada with his mother. And I was doing everything I possibly could to make my family life get stable. And so I had my body and I had my being and I had my balance. And when I put those three together for the very first time in years, I started to feel this flow, like a surge of energy come back into me. This surge of energy that was on the wake of certainty and confidence. I started to find my flow again in business. And no one could have ever convinced me. No one could have ever convinced me, had I not investigated this, that I would actually find deep power inside of my business by how I treated and respected and dealt with my wife and my children. That the greatest access to my business success was actually going to be driven by my alignment of my fitness, my spirituality, and my relationship with my wife and my children. This was not something I heard in a business conference. This is something they told us at business events and investment seminars about how to deal with life once you fucked it up, which is what I knew. I knew that game. Make a bunch of money, then figure out how to go back and try to repair shit after you've kind of destroyed all the relationships around you. And so I had no answers. I had no solutions. I had nothing to offer the marketplace. I had nothing to offer because I was hollow inside. I had nothing to offer because I was out of power inside. I had nothing to offer because I was disconnected. I was lost. I was hiding. And for the first time, I started finding some light. And then I recognized inside of that what I needed to do on a daily basis was study and expand myself in modern techniques of marketing, sales, and systems. And no matter what I did in business, that my number one investment was not a piece of real estate. My number one investment was not cryptocurrency. My number one investment in my life was my business. That this was my number one investment, that the number one asset in my life was Garrett. I was the number one asset inside of my business and production life. And that if I was weak, then everybody died. If the king doesn't rise, the kingdom dies. This was a phrase that came dear and near to my heart, one that I preached from the rooftops inside of Wake Up Warrior. As I was weak, the kingdom was weak. But as I began to build strength inside of myself through a gamified system known as Core 4 that you can learn inside of the Warrior Book, found at warriorbook.com, I started to find certainty, and that certainty poured me into business, and I started studying the skill sets and mindsets necessary in a modern game to win again at business. And as I started seeing that the number one investment in my life was my business, and that the number one asset in my life was me, and that as the number one asset, my money and investment would go in myself, and then I would put that money inside my businesses. And as that began to happen, shit began to turn around. And through a science I call reverse engineer production, which we will discuss on episodes that are upcoming, I began to see that the fastest path to bring stability to my life was not coming through the primary area of my business, that what I was missing the most was certainty, that what I was missing the most was power. And the only way for me to produce more, the only way for me to gain more profit, the only way for me to protect the kingdom was to ultimately begin at the source of the issue. The issue was not a tactic. The issue was me. Out of that pursuit and out of that purse or that drive, I uncovered the warrior's way. The warrior's way to having it all. And this has become the fuel, not only of my life, but of thousands of men's lives from around the world. 27 different countries who live this belief system on a daily basis, both as investors and as businessmen. They recognize that their lives and their investments and their businesses are driven by the power and the certainty and the capacity of the king. That the kingdom will rise if the king rises, but if the king doesn't rise, the kingdom will die. And so the first investment I make every single day is in myself. In my body, my being, my balance, and my business. And then from that place, I point the energy outwards into production. And I begin to move into our topics that we'll discuss on next week's show, which I begin to move into the money-making activities of marketing, sales, systems, leadership, and automation. I begin to create value in the marketplace through our marketing, value in the marketplace through our sales systems, and beginning to sell products, services, and experiences to the marketplace that they value, in experiences that they value, and inside of that place begin to not only set myself financially free, but also learn how to actually build businesses while building the rest of my life at the same time. I was not interested in going back to a business that built itself while I lost my family. I was not interested in going back and building a business and an investment portfolio while the rest of my health and my physical well-being disappeared. I was not interested in building a life that didn't work again while having a business that supposedly was working, because I was tired of being a fucking pretender. I wanted to feel a producer. I wanted to wake up in the morning and know that my life was in my hands, that as a business owner, my businesses were in my hands, that I was the asset and the liability, that I was the greatest accelerant and I was the greatest decelerant to my prosperity, that my wealth was not driven by someone else, that my wealth was not a come again, here again, hope I get lucky crapshoot on cryptocurrency, that my life itself in my business world and my money could be driven with predictability and sustainability, and that predictability and sustainability that I searched for began on the foundation of myself and my own personal fire. And so while there's going to be a lot of podcasts out there that will talk to you about the tactics of modern investing in business, we will go there also. We will go there next week. We're going to spend 1 week every month together, and I'm going to talk to you about the thing that makes the whole thing work. And if you are a man and you are listening to this show, I would encourage you to check out the book, warriorbook.com. It is the foundational piece to this entire game. It is the foundational piece that me and every man inside of the Wake Up Warrior movement leverage to not only increase our life experience to levels beyond anything we could ever imagine, but also take our businesses and our investments to strategies and to places of prosperity that we could never have fathomed. And the principles we talk here work for individuals who are transitioning into their first business to men running businesses worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is the truth. And this is the place that we come from. And this is the place that we rise from. And this is the place that we drive from. And I can't force you to do the work here. But my hopes here as we conclude this second episode here in our series with Warrior Wealth, that you come to understand that wealth itself is a function of creation. That it demands abundance as a psychology, that it demands that you see yourself as a king, that it demands that you see that the kingdom dies if the king doesn't rise. And all of the good intentions set out there your entire life will never set you free economically for long periods of time if you as a man have no stability. Your stability builds your prosperity. That is it. And like I said before, if you're ready to unlock that gamified system, a science we call the Warrior's Way to having it all, I would encourage you to head over to warriorbook.com and invest $100 and let us send you the book that has changed my life and changed hundreds of thousands of individuals with the concepts around the globe and thousands of men who currently hold that book in their hands and or have studied and trained with us since 2012. You might just find that your issue is not that you don't know what to do in business. Your issue is that you can't get the power to do it. And this might be the answer. Couple of reminders here as we wrap up this particular show, though. Next week, we're going to dive into production. I'm going to specifically be diving into the marketing conversation of why you as a marketer, you as a closer, and you as a leader must exist as a producer. And if you don't, guess what? You're fucked, and life itself is going to fall apart in very, very, very big ways. For the rest of this week, though, a couple reminders here in today's show, and the thought to really leave yourself with is to investigate what is your current psychology when it comes to yourself as the core of your investment in business life. This show itself is brought to you by Wake Up Warrior and also supported by its other supporting podcasts. The Warrior on Fire podcast, which is 10 minutes of daily fuel inside of your life every single day. If you haven't gotten access to that, I encourage you to subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Listen to the shows, get subscribed, and leave us a review as always. Also, for those that are married here inside of this and are looking for a conversation with my wife and I, we run another podcast called Date Your Wife, which I encourage you to head over there and learn more about the Date Your Wife experience. And then finally, we have one third show, which is Warrior Week. If you are unfamiliar with Warrior Week, I would encourage you to subscribe to the podcast Warrior Week Parables from the Pit with myself and Coach Sam Falsafi as my co-host, running us down the drive of an event series that has graduated over 1,000 men through a 5-day crucible that has led them as businessmen to a place of power and peace that they could have never understood prior to. My friends, that's all I got for you this week. Again, this was our power episode. Next week, we'll be back with production. Until then, this is Garrett J. White signing off, saying love and light, good morning, good afternoon, and good night.